Hi, this is Haley Menard from the Sugar Burger, and you are in my home kitchen today. We are going to walk through how I make French macarons. So I always prep the dry ingredients first because they need to be double sifted. That seems excessive, but it's really helpful when you're making something like a macaron. So the other thing I'm gonna do that isn't American is go by weight. We do grams. French are all about grams instead of measuring cups. The reason for that is because you can pack measuring cups all different ways, but with the weighted measurements, you're gonna get the same thing every time, right? I can put my body in all different outfits, but it's still the same thickness on the scale. So it's 150 grams of almond flour and 150 of powdered sugar. Did I say 150? It's 100 grams of almond flour and it's 100 grams of powdered sugar. We are going to sift this combination of almond flour and powdered sugar. Doesn't make it all the way in. You're fine. All right. That probably sounded terrible, huh? So since you're incorporating this into egg whites, you need it to be super fine so that it doesn't weigh them down. So sifting the dry ingredients this first time and then the second time makes it so that it's not gonna clump and weigh down your egg whites because you really want macarons to give you a good rise. So we're just gonna let this sifted mixture hang out while we do our egg beating. We're on to the wet ingredient / egg whipping part of the recipe. So this is the first spot where you could potentially mess this up and macarons become scary. What I've first done is we have egg whites. These egg whites have been separated and hanging out away from their significant other yolks for a bit. Resting them makes them just relax from being ripped apart. One of the things that I like to do, and I have learned over messing these up many times, is that I actually measure them. I don't just use 2 egg whites because they could be any size, and so you end up with really inconsistent stuff. Measuring them is hard because it's like measuring a pile of snot, but we will get through that. So it's messy and not pretty. Oh no! You prematurely dispensed. That's what she said. You probably shouldn't pick up your KitchenAid stand mixer like this. So it's 1/3 cup of egg whites. However many eggs that takes is what I recommend. Now that the 1/3 cup of egg whites is in there, we're gonna whip it up. So the first thing you wanna look for when you're whipping it is like a foamy stage. It looks like frothy. We will wait for that, and we're gonna hit it with like a 2 or a 4 if you have a stand mixer. I wouldn't go nuts right off the top. Here we go. All right, so we're all frothed up. I'm gonna add a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar or tartar. I don't really know how to say it. I feel like tartar is too fancy and tartar isn't fancy enough. All right, so that goes in there. And now we're gonna whip it until it kind of gets like soft peaks. It's gonna look like almost whipped creamy. So we can bump up the speed here. I'm gonna hit it with like a 6 and we'll go for a few minutes there. So at this stage, we're gonna add the sugar into here. There is a 1/4 cup of sugar in this rabbit measuring cup. We're gonna add this in 3 different stages because you don't really wanna put it all in at once. It's gonna weigh the egg whites down. They're gonna be like, I can't do this. So you just gotta go a little at a time. Again, we're going on a pretty high speed, like an 8, kick it up to a 10, feeling crazy. So we'll start adding this now, and this should get us to the next stage of the egg white whipping. So this is after we added the sugar, and it's at a stage that's like soft, pretty soft peaks, right? So if you pick up your mixer, you're gonna see this like flopped over like an alfalfa hairdo. So it's not standing up straight and stiff, so it's the soft peaks. So this is the stage you're gonna add your color. You don't wanna go too hard on this because the more moisture there is in the macaron, the more chances there are that it's gonna not come out right. I try to go do as little as possible or use dry food coloring, which is a good tip, but it takes a lot of that to make something really vibrant. I'm gonna start her off at like 3 drops. We're trying to do a light blue Cinderella-y color. Ooh. Now that the color's in, we've beat it a little bit longer. I would say probably only 30 seconds. We beat it to the stage where it is going to be more of a stiff peak. So if you pick up your mixer, you shouldn't really get an alfalfa. You'll see that this guy stands straight up. And some people say you could like put it over your head to see if it falls out, but I find that to be kind of a reckless way to test this. So this is pretty much what I do to make sure it's a stiff peak. Super confident. That's twice. All right, we're done with you. Now that the egg whites are stiffened and colored and all of these great things, we are going to do our second sift of these dry guys that we're hanging out right into the egg whites, into this bowl. I got more in that time. It was good. This is the second part that people often find themselves in a macaron pickle, which is the folding. So we're folding our dry ingredients that we double sifted into our stiffened egg whites. For this recipe, I usually start with a general idea of that I'm gonna do this 50 times. That seems to be about the right number. We're gonna swoop and then cut. Swoop and then cut. And each one of those counts as one, so we're at 3. All right, so we're at 45, so I'm just gonna kind of do a check-in. So you want to drop off of the spatula kind of looking like a leaf, which it isn't really doing that super great right now. And then when it hits its friends back in the pool here, you want it to kind of melt back into itself, into the batter within a few seconds. If it doesn't do that, it's not ready. But you can overmix it really easy, so I would like hit it with 5 at a time before you're seeing what you want to see. See how it's kind of like losing its definition right there? It's losing its definition on its own within like 10 seconds, and that's exactly what you want. So now that we are mixed in a good place, we're gonna put it in the piping bag. I find it easiest to just find like a beer glass and put my piping bag over it so that I'm not like trying to shove it in midair and it's just messy and unnecessary. This works best for me. This is where I usually get it on my clothes if it's gonna happen. We are in piping bag. I cut a hole in the bottom and we're gonna pipe it on this tray. We're gonna do our darndest to make them all the same size. These look pretty good. We piped them and that left like a little pat on each of them. Essentially, we're looking for that to go down as a sign that they are mixed enough and going to come out nice and smooth in the oven. The next part of this is getting the extra air out. Getting the extra air out is gonna make sure that your macaron doesn't crack. It's gonna make sure that we get the nice feet on it too, which also has to do with oven temperature. So to get the air out though is the fun part, and all the animals in the house scurry when it happens, and my husband hides and everything because it's super loud. But you do want to bang this on the counter with some feeling about 3 times. So you'll see that there are little pockets where the air bubbles bursted in the macaron. So that's the air that you got out of there. Next part is to let them rest. They've been through a lot, so we need to let them rest until when I touch it, that doesn't happen anymore. I don't want the macaron to come up on my finger. I want like a skin to form over the top. That can take anywhere from like 10 minutes to half an hour, depending on the weather. You know, the humidity in the room is definitely gonna affect it. So we just let them hang out before we put them in the oven, which is set at 300 degrees. I have an oven recommendation too. I would highly recommend an oven thermometer because ovens are goddamn liars, and if it's not the right temperature, these aren't gonna rise properly. They could wrinkle and not really rise, or they'll crack if you have hot spots. So the thermometer ensures that it's actually the temperature your oven's telling you. All right, give it a touch, no batter. These have rested long enough. They are ready to go in the oven. They have a nice little skin on top. They're kind of like a matte finish as opposed to super shiny. We will pop them into our 300-degree oven as per the oven timer. No, as per the oven thermometer. Do I need to do it all over? I'm doing 11 minutes, and then I'm gonna go in, see how they're cooking, spin the tray around, and another 11 minutes. All right, spin time. Oh my gosh, they're almost all of them are perfect. All right, let's get these boys out. So I put my finger in one and did a little bang by accident, but these boys look pretty good. So if we look up here, you can see that it's got like a nice smooth top. They got feet right here. The feet is this part right here, the little rim. Basically that's telling you that it rose properly, it was properly mixed, all that good stuff. So you let them sit here for about 10 minutes and then you should be able to peel them off of the tray with no problem. So now that we got the shells done, we're gonna let those boys cool and we are going to make the filling. So the filling's a buttercream in a very traditional sense. We have to make like a cooked egg yolk custard. You're probably wondering in the beginning what's gonna happen to the yolks. You separate it from their white, so this is how you're gonna use them. You take 2 egg yolks and you're gonna pop them in a saucepan and then we're gonna use another bunny 1/4 cup of sugar. Once that's added, you're gonna whisk it until it's like really light yellow and fluffy. And so don't be afraid to use your husband for this part because it is very aggressive on the forearm and men are better at that. So we need Nate now. Do you wanna put a hat on? You look very handsome. Use your trained forearm.
What you wanna do is trick the egg into thinking you're gonna go one way, you go the other way.
Dude, it's almost there. You went so quick. So this is kind of what you want to see. It's light yellow, it's fluffier, it's a nice consistency. Once it's to this phase, you can excuse your husband from the kitchen. And we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of whole milk. 2, 1. You're gonna whisk it in till the egg yolks and milk are combined. Once they're combined, you're gonna throw it on the stove, pretty low, like maybe just a notch or 2 above the lowest setting on your stove. Don't leave it, because I've burned many pans doing that. You're gonna cook it until it's like pudding consistency, and then you'll take it off the heat. All right, so we're looking for this consistency. Kind of like pudding, it's pretty thick. So this is ready to come off the heat. We do have to let it cool because otherwise it'll just melt your butter when you put it in and then that won't be frosting, that'll be butter soup. Now that our custard is cooled, we're gonna make the buttercream. So that involves just whipping the custard and the butter into a frenzy. We will add the butter in at like 1/3 of a stick at a time. It's 1 whole stick of butter. Once each piece is incorporated, you could just add the next. And then just let that fluff up. This is the part where you could start to get wild with flavors, right? You could put jam in here, you could put extracts in here, you could put booze in here. This is the part that really holds the flavor of the whole cookie. We've had enough excitement for today, so I'm just gonna do basic vanilla. I just use the measuring cap. It's about a teaspoon. I learned that from Sandra Lee. I'm gonna color this to match the cookies. This is the same blue we used before. So this is what it's gonna look like when it's done. Kind of frosting consistency. All right, so, nope, not all right so, because we're done saying all right so. The buttercream's all mixed up, it's all colored, it's ready to go. We're gonna put it in a piping bag, and then we're gonna pipe it in between our cookies. You can definitely tell that you cook these properly if you go to lift them off of the cookie sheet and there's no residue left. They come right up. You don't want them to be super overly brown. These look pretty good. Now we just fill them, which is the fun part. You ideally want the thickness of the buttercream in the middle to be the same as the thickness of the cookie. And you just top it with another die. And that's it, he's done. So here you have it, your homemade French macarons. A tip from me to you, if you really want them to be the best they can be, I would leave them in the fridge overnight and then let them come to room temp before serving them. They really are texturally very pleasing that way. So I hope you enjoyed all the tips and you don't have to make all the same mistakes I did.